The rain battered the windows of the Manhattan apartment, a relentless drumbeat that drowned out the city's hum. Elena stood frozen, her engagement ring glinting like a warning under the dim glow of fairy lights. In 12 hours she would be a bride, but tonight, she was a runaway, standing in the doorway of a past she thought she'd buried. Elena's cream dress clung to her skin, soaked from the storm she'd braved to get here. Her chestnut hair, once perfectly curled for her rehearsal dinner, now hung in damp waves around her face. She was 28, on the cusp of a life she'd meticulously planned. A wedding to a man who checked every box, a future that promised stability. But the weight of that future had driven her to this doorstep, to Riley, the one person who could unravel it all. Riley leaned against the doorframe, her auburn hair tousled, green eyes sharp with concern. At 29, she was still the same enigmatic figure from their college days, bold, unapologetic, and fiercely protective. "You're soaked," Riley said, her voice low, cutting through the storm's roar. She stepped aside, gesturing Elena inside. The apartment smelled of coffee and old books, a familiar sanctuary that made Elena's chest ache. "I didn't know where else to go," Elena whispered, her voice trembling. She hadn't seen Riley in years, not since their college graduation when they'd parted ways. Elena to a predictable life, Riley to a world of art and rebellion. Yet here she was, drawn back to the one person who'd ever made her question everything. Riley closed the door, shutting out the rain. "You're here now," she said simply, but her eyes held a storm of their own. She handed Elena a towel, her fingers lingering as they brushed against Elena's. The touch was a spark, reigniting memories of late-night talks, stolen glances, and a kiss they'd never spoken of again. Elena's life had been a straight line until college, when Riley crashed into it like a comet. They'd met in a literature class, debating poetry with a fire that left their professor speechless. Riley was all sharp edges and fearless honesty, while Elena was the quiet dreamer, always holding back. They'd spent countless nights in Riley's dorm, sprawled on the floor, sharing dreams and fears. One night, after too much wine, Riley had kissed her, a fleeting, desperate moment that Elena had buried deep, terrified of what it meant. Now, standing in Riley's apartment, that kiss felt like a ghost between them. "I'm getting married tomorrow," Elena said, more to herself than to Riley. The words tasted like ash. Riley raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a half-smile. "Yeah, I figured. The dress kind of gives it away." She paused, her gaze softening. "So why are you here, Elena? Why not at your fancy rehearsal dinner?" Elena's throat tightened. She didn't have an answer, not one she could say out loud. The truth was a tangled mess of fear and longing. She'd spent years building a life with Mark, her fiancé, a kind man who loved her in a way that felt safe. But safe wasn't enough anymore. Not when her heart raced at the thought of Riley, at the memory of a life she'd been too scared to chase. "I just needed to see you," Elena admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. She sank onto Riley's couch, the towel forgotten in her hands. The room was a snapshot of Riley's life. Canvases stacked against the walls, a guitar leaning in the corner, a shelf overflowing with books. It was chaos and beauty, everything Elena had never dared to be. Riley sat beside her, close enough that Elena could feel the warmth of her body. "You're freaking out," Riley said, not unkindly. "It's okay. Weddings do that to people." "It's not just the wedding," Elena said, her eyes fixed on the floor. "It's everything. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing." Riley was quiet for a moment, then reached for a bottle of whiskey on the coffee table. She poured 2 glasses, handing one to Elena. "Tell me," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "What's got you running through a storm to my door?" Elena took a sip, the burn grounding her. She wanted to spill everything, the doubts, the dreams, the way Riley's face had haunted her for years. But the words caught in her throat, trapped by years of playing it safe. Instead she said, "I don't know who I am anymore." Riley's eyes softened and she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You're Elena, the girl who cried reading Neruda, who danced in the rain when no one was watching. You're still her, even if you've forgotten." The words hit like a punch, cracking open something Elena had locked away. She wanted to argue, to say she'd changed, but Riley's gaze held her steady and unyielding. For the first time in years, Elena felt seen, not as a bride, not as Mark's fiancée, but as herself. The rain kept falling, a curtain between them and the world. Elena's heart pounded as she looked at Riley, at the freckles dusting her nose, the curve of her lips. She wanted to reach out to close the distance, but fear held her back. Tomorrow she'd be a wife. Tonight she was just a woman, lost and searching for something she couldn't name. The clock on Riley's wall ticked past midnight, each second a reminder of the life waiting for Elena. She clutched the whiskey glass, her fingers trembling as she tried to anchor herself in the moment. Riley sat cross-legged on the couch, watching her with a patience that felt both comforting and dangerous. "Do you love him?" Riley asked suddenly, her voice cutting through the silence. The question was a blade, sharp and precise, slicing through Elena's defenses. Elena's breath caught. "Mark's good to me," she said, dodging the question. "He's steady. He makes me feel safe." Riley's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed soft. "That's not what I asked." Elena set the glass down, her hands twisting in her lap. She thought of Mark, his warm smile, his predictable routines, the way he planned their future with spreadsheets and timelines. He was everything she'd been taught to want. Reliable, kind, successful. But love? The word felt hollow when she applied it to him, a shadow of what it should mean. "I thought I did," Elena admitted, her voice breaking. "But now, I don't know." She looked at Riley, her heart racing. "I keep thinking about you. About us." Riley's eyes widened, a flicker of hope crossing her face before she masked it with a wry smile. "Us? That was a lifetime ago, Elena. We were kids." "Were we?" Elena challenged, her voice gaining strength. "Because it doesn't feel like that. Feels like yesterday. Like I could reach out." And she stopped, her cheeks flushing. She'd almost said too much. Riley leaned forward, her gaze intense. "And what? What do you want to reach for?" Elena's heart pounded so loud she was sure Riley could hear it. She wanted to say everything, to confess the nights she'd lain awake, replaying that kiss, wondering what might have been. But fear clawed at her, whispering of ruined plans, broken promises, a life she'd already committed to. Instead she stood, pacing the small apartment. "I'm not supposed to be here," she said, more to herself than to Riley. "I'm supposed to be at the hotel getting ready. My dress is there, my family, my future." "Then why are you here?" Riley interrupted, standing too. She was close now, too close, her presence a magnet pulling Elena in. "You could have gone anywhere, Elena." "Why me?" Elena's eyes burned with unshed tears. "Because you're the only one who ever saw me," she said, her voice raw. "Not the perfect daughter. Not the perfect fiancée, just me." Riley's expression softened, and for a moment they stood in silence, the air thick with unspoken words. Then Riley reached out, tucking a strand of damp hair behind Elena's ear. The gesture was so gentle, so familiar, that Elena's resolve crumbled. "I saw you," Riley said quietly. "And I never stopped." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Elena's breath hitched as Riley's hand lingered, her thumb brushing against Elena's cheek. The touch was electric, pulling her back to that night in college, to the moment she'd run from because it scared her too much. "Riley," Elena started, but the words died as Riley stepped closer, their faces inches apart. The world narrowed to the space between them, to the warmth of Riley's breath, the intensity in her green eyes. Elena's heart screamed to close the gap, but her mind flashed to Mark, to the church, to the life she was supposed to live. "I can't," Elena whispered, stepping back. Her voice cracked, betraying her. "I'm getting married." Riley's hand dropped, her face unreadable. "Then why are you here?" she asked again, softer this time, almost pleading. Elena didn't have an answer. She sank back onto the couch, her head in her hands. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the storm inside her raged on. She thought of her parents, beaming with pride, of Mark's steady hand, of the life she built brick by careful brick. But she also thought of Rilioff, the way her laugh lit up a room, the way her touch felt like home. Riley sat beside her, keeping her distance this time. "You don't have to decide tonight," she said, her voice steady. "But you need to figure out what you want, Elena. Not what everyone else expects." Elena looked at her, tears spilling over. "What if I don't know what I want?" Riley's smile was sad but warm. "Then stay here until you do." They talked for hours, the conversation weaving through memories and dreams. Riley told her about her life painting, traveling, living unapologetically. Elena shared her doubts, her fears, the pressure of a life that felt like someone else's. The whiskey bottle emptied and the night deepened, but neither moved to turn on more lights. The fairy lights were enough, casting a soft glow over their words. As dawn approached, Elena's eyes grew heavy. Riley draped a blanket over her, guiding her to lie down on the couch. "Sleep," Riley murmured. "We'll figure it out tomorrow." Elena wanted to protest, but exhaustion won. She closed her eyes, Riley's scent leather and cedar lingering as she drifted off, her heart caught between two worlds. Morning light filtered through Riley's curtains, painting the room in soft gold. Elena stirred, her body aching from the couch, her mind foggy with the weight of the night before. She was still in her cream dress, now wrinkled, a stark reminder of the wedding waiting for her. Riley was in the kitchen, the clink of coffee mugs breaking the silence. She looked up as Elena sat up, her green eyes soft but guarded. "Morning," she said, handing Elena a steaming mug. "You sleep okay?" Elena nodded, though sleep had been fitful, haunted by dreams of white dresses and Riley's face. "Thanks for everything," she said, her voice hoarse. She sipped the coffee, its bitterness grounding her. Riley leaned against the counter, watching her. "You've got about 6 hours until you're supposed to say, 'I do.' What's the plan?" The question hung heavy. Elena's phone buzzed on the coffee table. A cascade of missed calls and texts from Mark, her parents, her maid of honor. She ignored it, her eyes fixed on Riley. "I don't know," she admitted. "I keep thinking about last night. About what you said." Riley's lips quirked, but there was no humor in it. "I said a lot of things. Which part's sticking?" "The part about me being enough," Elena said, her voice trembling. "I've spent my whole life trying to be what everyone else wants. But with you, I don't have to try." Riley's expression softened, but she didn't move closer. "Elena, I'm not here to make this harder. But you need to be honest with yourself. If you walk down that aisle, it's gotta be because you want it, not because it's expected." Elena's chest tightened. She thought of Mark waiting at the church, unaware of the storm in her heart. He deserved better than a bride who was running from her own truth. But the truth was terrifying. A leap into a world she'd never dared to imagine. "I'm scared," Elena whispered, her eyes meeting Riley's. "What if I choose wrong?" Riley crossed the room, sitting beside her. "You're not choosing between right and wrong," she said. "You're choosing between what's safe and what's true. Only you can decide which one you can live with." The words settled over Elena like a blanket, warm but heavy. She looked at Riley, at the freckles she'd once counted in the dark, at the strength in her hands. She wanted to reach out to hold on to this moment, but her phone buzzed again, pulling her back to reality. "I need to go," Elena said, standing. Her voice was unsteady but resolute. "I need to talk to Mark." Riley nodded, her face unreadable. "You know where to find me," she said, and the simplicity of it broke Elena's heart. The city was waking up as Elena stepped outside, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. She hailed a cab, her dress still crumpled, her heart a battlefield. The ride to the hotel was a blur, her mind replaying Riley's words, her touch, the way she'd made Elena feel alive. At the hotel, Mark was waiting in the lobby, his face a mix of relief and worry. "Elena, where were you?" he asked, pulling her into a hug. "I was going crazy." "I'm sorry," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "I needed time." He pulled back, searching her face. "Time for what? Are you okay?" Elena took a deep breath, the weight of her decision pressing down. "We need to talk," she said, leading him to a quiet corner. Her heart pounded as she began, the words spilling out her doubts, her fears, the truth she'd been running from. Mark listened, his face paling. "Is this about someone else?" he asked, his voice tight. Elena hesitated, Riley's face flashing in her mind. "It's about me," she said finally. "I don't know if I can be the wife you deserve." The conversation was raw, painful, but honest. Mark's hurt was palpable, but so was his love. "I want you to be happy," he said, his voice breaking. "If that's not with me, I'll let you go." Tears streamed down Elena's face as she hugged him, grateful for his kindness, heartbroken for the pain she'd caused. When they parted, she felt both lighter and heavier. The future uncertain but her own for the first time. She left the hotel, her phone in hand, Riley's number glowing on the screen. She didn't call, not yet. She needed to find herself first, to understand what her heart was screaming. Elena wandered the streets of New York, the city's pulse mirroring her own. The wedding was supposed to start in an hour, but she'd called her parents, her voice steady as she explained she couldn't go through with it. Their disappointment stung, but it was a weight she could bear. For the first time she was choosing herself. She found herself in a small park, the leaves turning gold under the September sun. Sitting on a bench, she pulled out her phone, scrolling through old photos. There was one from college, her and Riley at a music festival, arms around each other, laughing like the world was theirs. The memory warmed her, but it also ached, a reminder of what she'd let slip away. Her fingers hovered over Riley's number. She wanted to call, to run back to that apartment, but doubt gnawed at her. What if Riley had moved on? What if the spark between them was just nostalgia, not love? But then she remembered Riley's words, "You're enough," and she knew she had to try. The cab ride back to Riley's was agonizing, each red light a test of her resolve. When she knocked on the door, her heart was in her throat. Riley opened it, her face a mix of surprise and hope. "You're back," she said, stepping aside. "I didn't get married," Elena said, the words rushing out. "I couldn't. Not when I'm still in love with you." Riley froze, her eyes searching Elena's. "You mean that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elena nodded, tears spilling over. "I've been running from us for years. I was scared of what it meant, of what I'd lose. But I'm more scared of living a life that's not mine." Riley stepped closer, her hand reaching for Elena's. "You don't have to run anymore," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm right here." They stood there, hands clasped, the world falling away. Elena felt the weight of her fears lift, replaced by a quiet certainty. She didn't have all the answers, but she had this moment, and it was enough. Riley pulled her inside, closing the door. They sat on the couch, the same one where Elena had slept the night before, and talked. Not about the future, not about the past, but about now, about the way Riley's paintings filled the room with color, about the poetry Elena still wrote in secret. They laughed, they cried, and when Riley kissed her, it was like coming home. The kiss was slow, deliberate, a promise of everything they'd left unsaid. Elena's heart raced, but this time it wasn't fear, it was joy. She pulled back, resting her forehead against Riley's, their breaths mingling. "I don't know what comes next," Elena admitted, her voice soft. Riley smiled, brushing a tear from Elena's cheek. "We'll figure it out together." They spent the day in that apartment, wrapped in each other, the outside world forgotten. Elena knew there would be challenges, her family's disapproval, the whispers of a small-minded world, but she also knew she was finally living her truth. As night fell, they lay on Riley's bed, fully clothed, their fingers intertwined. Elena felt a peace she hadn't known in years, the kind that comes from choosing love over fear. She drifted off, Riley's heartbeat a steady rhythm against her own, and for the first time she wasn't running. Weeks passed, and Elena's life began to take shape in ways she'd never imagined. She moved out of the apartment she'd shared with Mark, finding a small studio in Brooklyn filled with light. It wasn't much, but it was her space to rebuild, to rediscover the woman she'd buried under expectations. She and Riley saw each other often, their connection growing stronger with each shared moment. They went to art galleries, danced in dive bars, read poetry under the stars. Elena started writing again, her words flowing with a freedom she'd forgotten. Riley's paintings became bolder, infused with the colors of their new beginning. But it wasn't all easy. Elena's parents struggled to understand, their calls laced with hurt and confusion. She faced their questions with honesty, explaining that she was finally living for herself. It was painful but necessary, a step toward healing. One evening, as they walked along the Hudson River, Riley stopped, turning to Elena. "You're different now," she said, her eyes warm. "Lighter. Like you're finally you." Elena smiled, squeezing Riley's hand. "I am. Because of you." Riley shook her head. "Not me. You did this. You chose yourself." The words settled deep in Elena's heart, a reminder of the strength she'd found. She'd spent years hiding, afraid of her own desires, but now she was free not just to love Riley, but to love herself. Their relationship wasn't perfect. There were arguments, insecurities, moments of doubt. But there was also laughter, trust, and a love that grew stronger with each challenge. Elena learned to navigate the world as an openly queer woman, finding community in places she'd never looked before. She met others who'd faced similar struggles, their stories a tapestry of resilience and hope. One night, months later, Elena stood before a small crowd at a poetry reading, her voice steady as she read a piece about love and courage. Riley was in the audience, her smile a beacon. When Elena finished, the applause was warm, but it was Riley's proud gaze that mattered most. Afterward, they walked home, the city alive around them. "I'm proud of you," Riley said, her arm around Elena's shoulders. "I'm proud of us," Elena replied, leaning into her. She thought of the night she'd shown up at Riley's door, a runaway bride searching for answers. She'd found more than Thatched found herself. The journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more moments of doubt. But Elena knew she could face them, because she was no longer alone. She had Riley, she had her art, and most importantly, she had the courage to live her truth. As they reached Riley's apartment, Elena paused, looking at the stars above the city. "Thank you," she whispered, not just to Riley, but to the universe, for giving her the strength to choose love. Riley kissed her forehead, her voice soft. "Here's to us, Elena. To everything we'll become." And as they stepped inside, hand in hand, Elena knew that whatever came next, they'd face it together, a love story written not in fear, but in hope, resilience, and the beauty of being true. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.